Hey guys, and welcome back to Hoosier Hardware, and today we're taking a look at this GPU. This is the GTX 970 from 2014, and basically I want to run it in a couple of modern titles and see if this is a GPU that you should actually consider picking up for 1080p gaming in early 2020. Now obviously this would be utilizing the used market, so we're not really going to be paying attention to how this card was priced new, but of course the value needs to be there, which is the whole point of these benchmarks. Now before we get into the benchmarks of the 970, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the specs on this card. This is a GPU that launched back in September of 2014 at a price tag of $329 USD. Built on the 28 nanometer TSMC process, the 970 features 1664 CUDA cores and notably 4 gigabytes of GDDR5 memory, though if you'll recall, only 3.5 gigabytes of that 4 gigabytes total of GDDR5 memory was actually running at any kind of reasonably fast speed for VRAM. That last half a gigabyte of video memory was borderline unusable in some cases, and there was a lot of controversy surrounding the marketing of the 970 as a 4 gigabyte card. In fact, there was a lawsuit that was later on settled. And finally, this is a 145 watt TDP card, and NVIDIA recommends a 500 watt power supply to run the 970. Most of these cards do feature at least two 6-pin PCIe power connectors. The one I'm featuring today, the EVGA model, actually features an 8-pin and a 6-pin PCIe power connector, so you do need some extra power connectors to actually power this card. For today's comparisons, we're going to be running it up against the RX 470 4 gigabyte card that I have been running a few different tests on in the recent past, and the reason we're just comparing these two cards is basically really simple. I already have the figures from the RX 470 because I'm using the exact same test bench featuring that Ryzen 1800X with 16 gigabytes of DDR4 memory running at 3000 megahertz. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and hop into those benchmarks and see how the GTX 970 compares to the RX 470. Starting off our benchmarks in Metro Exodus, we saw a marginal victory for the RX 470. This is using the normal preset on the built-in benchmark in DirectX 12 at 1080p. We saw averages for both cards there in the 50s, and the 1% lows were in the low 30s for the RX 470 and the high 20s, or the higher 20s rather, at 26 for the GTX 970, but very similar performance in this title. Borderlands 3 flips the script a little bit with the medium preset on DirectX 11 at 1080p, seeing a marginal victory for the GTX 970 in this case, though again both cards do perform fairly well. The only exception to these charts with the fairly well sort of label there is the RX 470 definitely suffered from a lower 0.1% low. Basically there was a much more noticeable stutter with the RX 470 than there was in the built-in benchmark with the GTX 970. So if this is your title of choice, then the GTX 970 may be the way to go in this particular title. And finally, in Red Dead Redemption 2, balanced preset Vulkan API at 1080p, we saw the exact same average at 42, very similar 1% lows, 32 for the RX 470 and 30 for the 970, and then the 0.1% low once again favored the RX 470, but ever so slightly at 29 versus 25. So this title, the performance is really not going to be noticeably different for either of these cards. At least that was the case in the built-in benchmark. Obviously, depending on where in the game world you are, may make your results vary a little bit. So it is conclusion time, and this really comes down to value. Now in a lot of titles, and I'll go ahead and link to another video down below that compares the 970 with the 470 in some of the older titles that came out prior to these titles that I'm actually looking at in this video, just to give you a wider sample size of how the 470 and the 970 compare. But basically they are very similar in a lot of titles. There are some titles that the 470 is going to get a win, and there are some titles that the 970 gets a win, and it looks like a lot of the NVIDIA favored titles are going to favor the GTX 970 over the 470, which is exactly what we would expect. So my recommendation to you is really simple. Look at the titles that you plan on playing most to decide which of these cards is actually going to perform better. Now, if you're looking for the best value out of this proposition, the GTX 970 is a lot more of a hard sell to make because of that $110-ish price tag if you're looking for readily available cards on eBay. Now, through auctions as well as best offers or just local markets, you're likely to be able to find a 970 for cheaper than that $110. But if we're looking at pure value of what's readily available on eBay, the RX 470, or if you're looking at RX 570s or even RX 480s and 580s, are just a much better value. You're typically using a little bit less power with a 470 or a 570. Most of them just require one 8-pin or even sometimes just one 6-pin PCIe connector instead of two of those different connectors, whether it be two 6-pins or one 8 and one 6 like the 970s often have. And also you're getting very similar performance at a price tag that's often about $40 cheaper on eBay than you're going to be finding GTX 970s. So the value is just much better on an RX 470 or an RX 570. Now, if the 970 is a card that you already own and you're just trying to figure out whether it's up to snuff for modern AAA titles at 1080p gaming, then yes, the GTX 970 definitely does still have a little bit of leg left in it before it's really reaching the end of modern gaming life for this particular GPU. But of course, I do want to hear your guys' thoughts on the GTX 970. Is this a card that you're still rocking here in 2020? It was one of the most popular cards of its day and continues to be a popular GPU as well. So let me know what you think of the 970. This is a card that I actually rocked in my main system for a good long while until I finally upgraded to the GTX 1070 down the road, but it served me very well. I do want to know how it did for you guys. Let me know all your thoughts down below. And of course, if you liked the video, give it a like, share, subscribe, comment. All those things are very helpful for the channel. You can follow me both on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. And as always, I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.